Hi everybody. So today I'm answering a couple of questions, but the main question that we're looking at today is can my house be heated by a heat pump? Is my house suitable for a heat pump? I get these questions every day. I live in a 1980s property. I've got double glazed windows. I've got a good door. I've got no insulation under the floor, and I don't have great insulation in the loft. 3 bedrooms. Is it possible? That's kind of a stock house in the UK, and the answer is most houses can be heated with a heat pump. Most houses. But how do we get to that point? How do we say, well, this house can be and this house can't be serviced with a heat pump? It boils down to what is the heat demand for the property. So heat demand is we talk about these things as the envelope of the property. So the envelope of the property is what is the material that the walls are made of, what type of windows do we have, what is the insulation in the loft, is there any insulation in the floor, is it a solid floor, is it a suspended floor? That is the envelope. So the envelope, the air tightness, and of course in the UK we've got many old properties. It's leaky. There might be drafts around the windows, the doors. It might be single glazed windows. It might be single skin 1900s built, the property. There might be areas of the property that has got certain extensions on. So you might have a grade 2 listed building, but then you've got a fairly modern extension. And how does that then affect the heat demand of the property? So I want to take a little bit of time and discuss it. This is in very simple terms of how to get to the heat demand for a property, and then if your house is going to be suitable or not. Every house is different, so I'm going to speak in broad terms. How do you determine the heat demand for the property? So firstly, very old properties, single skin properties with single glazed windows, no insulation under the floor, suspended floors, wooden floors. Those are kind of the very, very high heat demand properties. Properties like those, we see them as, I'm going to speak about per square meter, and the heat demand per square meter for properties like those, and the other properties that I'll be discussing later as well. So properties like I'm explaining, they are generally looking at about 120 watts per square meter. And so single skin, single windows, very bad insulation, no loft, no insulation in the floors. It's kind of 100 to 120 watts per square meter. It's quite leaky. It's not ideal for heat pumps, to be honest, but it can still work. But we'll need to do the design and the specifications really carefully when it comes to properties like that. So 120 watts per square meter. And then I'm going to take you over right to the other side of the spectrum, and we're looking at passive houses. Passive houses, the envelope of the passive house is so good. The envelope is the air tightness of the passive house is really, really great. You're looking at 10 to 15 watts per square meter. The peak heat demand for a property like that, a passive house. So passive houses, 10 to 15 watts. So let's say we are working in a model of roughly 100 square meters, just for ease of calculations for this video. 100 square meters, passive house. We look at 10 to 15 watts. So let's say 15 watts per square meter. That means that 15 watts per square meter times 100 square meters is 1.5 kilowatts. of peak heat demand. That's in the middle of winter. That's kind of what you will require on the space heating side of the heating for a property. So 1.5 kilowatts, the peak heat demand. You really only need a very small radiator. You can even do it with an electric radiator. It's really very easy going to be to service the heat demand for a property like that. If you've got 300 square meters of passive house, you're looking at 4.5 kilowatts peak heat demand for a property like that. So that falls into the realms of a small heat pump with underfloor heating. Potentially mechanical ventilation will be added into a property like that very successfully. And then you'll have other technologies that we'll speak about in different videos. 100 square meters period property, grade 2 listed, for instance, you're looking at 120 watts per square meter. So 120 watts per square meter times by 100 square meters, you're looking at roughly 12 kilowatts of peak heat demand for a property like that. Great. So those are the two spectrums of the peak of heat demands. Very old properties, very hard to heat properties, and then very new, very easy to heat properties. And then where do we fit in ideally? So new build properties, this video is made in 2021, winter of 2021. So where do we sit? New build properties, the insulation values of new build properties, the U values of those properties are really good. So you're kind of looking at new build properties to spec is about 35 watts per square meter on new build properties. So again, 100 square meters new build property in 2021, you're kind of looking at about 3.5 kilowatts per 100 square meters. So if you build a 200 square meter property, of course you're gonna need about 6 to 7 kilowatts of peak heat demand for a property like that. So there's many heat pumps that can service the heat demand for that, and that's where we come in, and we'll do the design for what you really require for a property of that sort. If it's a new build property, then we'll add mechanical ventilation or underfloor heating or stuff like that. All right, so that is new build property 2021. Now let's go back about 20 years from now. 20 years ago, we had underfloor insulation as well. So underfloor insulation was introduced to the building code, and what's happened with that was that the envelope, as we spoke about earlier, now becomes stronger, becomes better after about 20 years ago. And that means that under the floor, the insulation, there's 100 to 150 millimeters of insulation under the floor, and then it got screeded over the top of that, so the envelope became stronger. At that stage there was cavity walls, and if the cavity walls are filled, that's wonderful, and then the next step would be really good loft insulation. And if you've got these three elements, so you've got underfloor insulation, your cavity walls are filled, you've got good loft insulation, and you've got good double glazed windows and draft-proof doors, then you're looking at a really good heat demand, quite a low heat demand for a property like that, kind of looking in the region of about 50 watts per square meter for properties like that. All right, so that's kind of where we sit with these things. Please do not, this is just for an example, this video, so don't quote me on this, and don't tell people, oh, Reinhard has said this and this is law. It's not the law. And we will I'm gonna, at the end of the video, I'm gonna explain to you how we do a full room by room heat loss calculation, and then base our design and specifications based on the heat demand that's come from that room by room heat loss calculation. All right, so, and then before that, when we did not have insulation under the floors, that gives you immediately, it gives you a higher heat demand, because now suddenly the cold can come up from under the house, and it can come into the house. That's a heat demand, a heat loss just there. So what do we have? So we've got cavity walls, very typical. We've got no insulation under the floors, good insulation in the loft, double glazed windows, draft proof doors. You're kind of looking at roughly between 50 and 60 watts per square meter. So 100 square meters times 50 watts per square meter, you're looking at roughly 5 kilowatts of peak heat demand for a property like that. Very typical. These are kind of rule of thumb things. You can't base your design and specifications on this, but this is a good starting point, kind of just for you to understand what type of heat pump you require. So if you start getting quotes and you've got a 100 square meter property and suddenly they say, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you need a 12 kilowatt system, but you've got cavity walls that's filled, you've got good loft insulation, double glazed windows, the red flag should go off at that stage. And like, why do you offer me something so big? It doesn't sound like that is the thing that I require. And if your system is too big, the running cost of these units will be excessive. It will not be in your favor to have such a large oversized heat pump. Heat pumps are very much designed to mathematical calculations. So how do we get to this mathematical calculation? So from our point, we do a room by room heat loss calculation. This is a paid for service by a third party surveyor, but what you get for that is you get a full specification of exactly what you require for your property. The surveyor will come into the property and every room will be measured, the ceiling height will be measured, the insulation level of every component in that room as well as the house will be measured, and we will know exactly what is the heat demand, what is the envelope of the property, what is the heat demand for the property. That the survey gives us the ability to say, this is what you really require. What is currently in your property? Do you have radiators? Do you have underfloor heating? Do you have a combination of these two things? And that will determine what we will specify for your property. If you've got underfloor heating, that is great. Underfloor heating works at a lower flow temperature, and that generally makes the systems more efficient and more effective. And then when you go to radiators needs to be sized to the right size for the heat demand for the rooms. And that's going to be my next video. I'm going to talk to you about radiator sizing and how can radiators, because we all have heard bad things about heat pumps, and heat pumps don't work and I can't keep my property warm, and we've got radiators, and someone said to me I need to replace all the pipe work. I want to just give you my take on that. I want to give you my take on radiators, pipe sizing, and the heat and the flow temperature on these things, and the design ultimately that it boils down to, and how we will get to a design for your property that is currently on radiators that does not have underfloor heating. Great. So thanks for listening to this video. If you like what you have heard, then there's many other videos in this channel. And then if you are inquiring for a heat pump and you want to speak to someone impartial, please give us a call. My phone number is in the description of this video. So please make contact with us, have a call with us. Let's talk to you. Let's find out what is the heat demand for your property over the phone. And then if you want to specify things after that, let's get a heat loss surveyor out to your property. Let's do the heat loss survey. And then after that, let's specify and design something for you. And you can make a difference for the environment today by making the right choice. Great. So have a great day. Hope to speak to you soon, and pass this video on to anyone that could benefit from this. All right. All the best. Bye-bye.